When was the last time you were in your flow state? Have you ever been so immersed in something that you lost complete track of time and you felt one with the activity? Maybe you were cooking or playing tennis or lost in an Excel spreadsheet. How about a brainstorming meeting? Ever have ideas and insights that just come in from out of the blue? And don't you just love it when things come together with a sense of ease? During these kinds of experiences, you were in flow. Neuroscientists have discovered that in these moments, hormones are released, creating brainwaves conducive to the flow state. The neocortex amps up dramatically, increasing learning speed, and the prefrontal cortex temporarily shuts down. And this explains why we lose a sense of time and a sense of ourselves, key indicators that we are in the flow state. These are the neurobiological conditions that make creativity and outstanding performance readily available. As a violinist, losing myself by getting into the music has been my answer for everything. I had no idea why, but it's how I overcame obstacles like shyness and audition anxiety. It's how I found fulfillment in my work, and it's how I learned to lead. Without the flow state, I never would have been able to play my best when I was the concertmaster of the Central Oregon Symphony. The concertmaster is the lead violinist and second in command to the conductor. And imagine if I was just sitting there going through the motions. What a huge disservice that would be for both the orchestra and the audience. I didn't have a choice. I had to get into my music. Nowadays, in my work with organizations worldwide, I teach leaders and teams how to get into flow on demand. It's a process that took me over a decade to discover, but once I figured out the steps, I could get into flow whenever I needed it. It's like a superpower, and each of you has your own version of it. But the problem is, we don't find ourselves in flow very often. But when you do get there, you're in the middle of a challenge, giving it your undivided attention, and you are rocking it. And then at some point you look up and you wonder, where's the time gone? Then you realize you're out of flow and you don't know how to get yourself back into that blissful state. And doesn't it seem like flow is the hardest to get into when you need it the most? Like when you're burned out or doing something outside of your comfort zone, or just trying to make a great impression. Well, with all of this in mind, you might be wondering, okay, well then how does a musician get into the music and into their flow state? And we have a hard time explaining it. We say things like, I feel it. It's like I'm singing. It just happens to me. And we expect musicians, athletes, and yogis to be in flow. We expect artists, writers, and revolutionary scientists to be in flow. Why don't we expect the same with people at work? How many people are just going through the motions? Do you get through your workday and leave drained, or do you get into your workday and leave energized? Contrary to public opinion, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist who coined the flow state, discovered that flow is not just for athletes and people in the arts. His research has verified that the majority of people getting into their flow state are going through the business of their day-to-day lives, and here's why. The entry point to flow exists at the intersection of skill and challenge. Don't we all experience that on a daily basis? And for children, it's when play and learning become one. And if we adults could just get over ourselves and lighten up a little bit, we could get into it that way too. Many of you do get into flow on a daily basis, but you save it for life outside of work, like it's your reward for getting through the stress of it all. Many of you get into flow during the workday, only to be interrupted by quick questions, arbitrary deadlines, or kids running through the house. What if you could get into your flow state on demand? What if it's the answer for increasing the meaning, joy, and fulfillment in your life? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. And we may think that flow is esoteric, it's for the elite. That's not true. Being in the flow state, it brings out the best in all of us. So if we're all wired for this optimal kind of thinking, you might be wondering, well, do I just have to sit around and wait for a lucky moment for it to happen? Well, I had to ask myself the same question. I'm 15 years old, in my room, blasting the music. Not rock and roll. I'm listening to a violin concerto. And in my imagination, it was as if I was the soloist, standing center stage, pouring the core of my soul into every note I played. But when I was in college pursuing a degree in music, I found myself playing in a lot of orchestras. So fun. And it was the environment where all of my hard work, my practicing, and my passion would just magically come together. It was a real life experience where the music would just sweep me away. So I decided to dedicate myself to becoming a professional violinist in a symphony orchestra. And I did a good job, not child prodigy good, but hardworking good. And when I sit down with people like you and we talk about what it feels like when we're doing our best work, it's very similar to what I experienced playing in orchestras. So after I graduated from college, I started to audition to get into a professional symphony orchestra. And feeling bulletproof with my New York City violin training, I'd show up, check in, and I'd make my way to the warm-up room. And the commotion is deafening. All of my competitors are in there warming up at the same time. So I find my own little spot, I'm taking out my violin, I'm warming up. And despite all the noise around me, I find myself losing myself in the music. 45 minutes later, Diane Allen, next. So I leave the noisy warm-up room, I step into the hallway, and it's so quiet, all I could hear is the fuzz in my ears and my heart. Walk out on stage, up to a solitary music stand, line of judges sitting in a row. And as I lift my violin and I bring the bow to my strings, the nervous quiver in my hand transfers into the bow and it's bumping and bouncing up and down. But I'm a well-trained, well-rehearsed musician, so I play on. But I'm so distracted by the lack of control, I'm just going through the motions. What a nightmare. And as for whatever happened next, that's when the amnesia set in. What I do know is that I left the audition early. What I don't know is whether it was my choice or the judges. Am I the only one here who's been seen in public looking like this? What a far cry from my fearless childhood vision of being the soloist. I can't even get an orchestra job. Me, be the featured artist standing center stage, pouring the core of my soul into every note I play? Pipe dream. I wish I could tell you this was a one-time event. It wasn't. But the funny thing is as long as I was in the practice room or at rehearsal or during the concert, getting into flow was like turning on a light switch. But during my auditions, it escaped me. And because of this, I was at a high risk of living an unfulfilled life with my music trapped inside of me. 10 years later, somehow I've managed to stay in the game. In order to make ends meet, I'm scrounging for violin students in a very competitive teaching market. And due to my nerves, not only am I playing in freelance orchestras, I'm sitting last chair. That's like being picked last for dodgeball at the age of 34. Well, during this time, I saw this ad, violin teacher wanted, Central Oregon, and for whatever reason, I decided to make a go for it. And I'm at the audition, and from out of the blue, as luck would have it, I find myself going to that place where all of my hard work, my practicing, and my passion magically come to life. I am so immersed in the music that underneath my fingers, it's like the violin is singing by itself. The students that I'm teaching, they're responding really well to my spontaneous creative solutions. In the audience were the students, their parents, there were teachers there, fellow musicians, and to my surprise, the conductor from the local symphony orchestra. The day-long marathon felt like it went by in 5 minutes. And at the end of the day, they offered me the job on the spot, and I say yes. Back in college, I didn't have a name for it, but clearly being swept away by the music was a sure sign that I was getting into my flow state. During my auditions, I got knocked off my game. Finding my flow was the answer. Whether I was a student or freelancing or teaching and performing as a concertmaster, I had the same training. I had the same talent. I had the same passion. It was in me all along. Accessing my flow state is how I play my best and experience my greatest and deepest levels of fulfillment. It was December 1997 when I was scrounging for violin students and sitting last chair. But January 1998, I was welcomed to Central Oregon with a full roster of violin students waiting for me, and I was hired to sit first chair of the Central Oregon Symphony. For me, it was fear, but a lack of performing our best is different for everyone. There are people who choke up when they just have to speak during a meeting. There are people who knowingly lower the quality of their work just to get through the heavy workload. And there are people who entered the workforce with dreams of changing the world who are now disappointed with the lack of impact. I don't know what it is for you, but just like it was for me when I was trying to audition successfully, people can get stuck trying to tap into their flow and into the goodness that's already in there. I was incredibly lucky to get into my flow state for that audition, but I didn't have a system for it. And I remember thinking, well, that worked. So I would use my passion to get into the music because that's how I had just found my confidence. And then I noticed that the more I got into the music, the better I played. And the better I played, the more I got into the music. It was this positive feedback loop. And then I noticed it was the same with my students, but just in a different way. The more I would get into the music, the more they would get into the music. Imagine a little kiddo at the violin recital just rocking it. The students are inspiring each other. The parents, they're dabbing the tears from their eyes. Standing room only, year after year after year. I never had to advertise. I always had a waiting list. I kid you not. This was my workplace culture. With regards to the orchestra, in my role as the concertmaster, the struggle was finally over. All of my dormant skills just came alive, and it felt so good to finally be able to put all of my training and passion to full use. And with hundreds of rock-solid performances under my belt, turning on that light switch and getting into flow became routine. Except for this one concert. I'm giving the pre-concert lecture, having a really good time. I turn around, sit down, give a big cue for the music to start, and I can't move. My elbows are frozen. And while it's feeling like an hour, it's really only about a minute for me to regain the full use of my arm. But now there's a disconnect. I'm not putting any feeling into the music. It's like I forgot how. That can't ever happen again. My first thought was I was having a transition issue, going from speaking to the audience into playing the violin. It wasn't. It was really about the shift from out of flow into the flow state. I had to find a way to shift into flow and to be able to do it on purpose. After the concert, I launched into this series of questions. I had to solve this problem because now my job security and my reputation are at stake. And it was this process of self-discovery that ended up unlocking my flow. And it's a series of questions I've been asking ever since, which I later found out corresponds directly with the latest flow state research. And with this system in place, I started to help other people to unlock their flow and be in their genius. In my role as a strategic advisor, working with a variety of different industries, whenever I'm describing flow, I could be talking to a pipe fitter, a software engineer, or someone in human resources. Whatever the job title, the process is the same. And so I started to help people to overcome fear of public speaking. 75% of the population has that fear. I worked with founders of startup companies to deliver these impassioned investor pitches at really high-stakes funding events. I've helped leaders to increase their influence and teams to find their synergy. These are the results that I want to teach you so that you can get into it anytime, any place, no matter how high the pressure. This way you can drop into flow whenever you need it the most. That night after that dreaded concert, I'm sitting on the couch feeling humiliated, and I am grilling myself with questions. I do get into my flow state in a variety of places. Happens the most here on stage. But what am I doing? Well, yes, of course, I'm playing the violin. That's what I'm doing on the outside. What am I doing on the inside? My friends would say, Diane, we're creating the music, and I get it, but it feels different for me. I feel like I'm sharing. I'm sharing the message of the music, and I'm sharing the experience. Okay. Well, then what about those concerts when I'm moved to tears? It's like the flow state on steroids. It always happens at those audience sing-alongs. Something about a large group of people coming together through the music. Why? Why is that so meaningful? Unity. That's what touches me to the core. That night, when I couldn't get into the music, literally, this is what was going on. Just keep moving, just keep moving, just keep moving. I bet if I had known to focus on sharing and creating unity, I could have gotten back into the music. Well, there is nothing like the sting of embarrassment to give you a kick in the pants. And after all of this personal self-reflection, it ended up being a good thing. It's how I discovered my flow strategy. Sharing is how I shift into the flow state on purpose. Unity is how I can shift into it with purpose. The question is, do you have to sit around and wait for a lucky moment to get into flow? Not when you can use your flow strategy to be the best version of yourself. I was giving a workshop on peak performance, and there was a manager there who flat out refused to give a status report at their annual company-wide meeting. His job filled the entire pipeline of the company. He was the land acquisition manager for a real estate developer. And so his absence on that annual meeting stage did not bode well for people to have confidence in what was coming down the pipeline. Turns out, where he gets into his flow state the most is bicycle racing. On the outside, he's dressed in spandex, riding a super cool bike. But on the inside, he is selflessly supporting the team as if their life depended on his help. And the synergy that was created, that's what lighted his fire and why he found bike riding so meaningful. Knowing his flow strategy gave him a really good reason to stand in front of 250 people and give the status report. He wanted to support his coworkers and to create that team synergy. After I spoke to a room full of scientists, one of them beelined straight over and she says, "How's this going to help me in the boardroom?" And the lab is where she gets into her flow state the most. On the outside, she's working with her hands, but on the inside, she's discovering. And why it's so meaningful is that she's making a contribution to the expansion of knowledge. I thought being a musician was inspiring. Anyways, I just asked her, is there some way you can use your hands when you're in the boardroom? And nowadays, she's got a reputation for livening up the meetings because she's the one who shows up with a model and she uses her hands to demonstrate. That night, when I was sitting on the couch trying to figure out if I could get into flow on demand, it boiled down to answering 3 questions. 3 questions that help people to discover their flow strategy. And these are the 3 questions that unlock your genius. And in order for you to answer these questions for yourself, I want you to recreate a memory of a time when you were in flow. And if this is new for you, don't worry. I want you to observe yourself for 2 weeks, finding a time when you slip into flow. And then you'll be able to apply these 3 questions to extract your own flow strategy. So let's just do a quick little review. The entry point of flow exists at the intersection of skill and challenge. And just like children, we still have the capacity to get into it by merging play with learning. The key indicators of flow are losing a sense of time, losing a sense of yourself, ideas and insights coming in from out of the blue, things coming together with a sense of ease. That positive feedback loop where the more you get into it, the more you get out of it, and experiencing joy and fulfillment. So whether you're recreating a memory of a time or finding a time when you were in flow, I want you to ask yourself, where? Where am I when I'm in my flow state the most? And with that place in mind, what am I doing? What am I doing on the outside and on the inside? Now ask why. Why is it so meaningful? What you do on the inside is your most compelling internal self-motivator. And knowing what you do on the inside means you can now shift into your flow state on purpose. Why it's so meaningful is your most compelling external self-motivator. And knowing why it's so meaningful means you can now shift into your flow state with purpose. This is your flow strategy. This is your unique way of connecting what you love to what you do. Why not love your job? I always knew that playing in an orchestra was going to be the job of my dreams, and it was that vision that kept me going through those 10 years while I struggled to get work. And even though I complained about playing in freelance orchestras, I, along with many others, kept going back for more. We were the members of the Freeway Philharmonic, driving from gig to gig for low pay compared to our high skill level. But once the conductor would give the downbeat and the orchestra would explode into sound, we would sync up, tap into our deepest levels of engagement and our highest levels of productivity. These small town orchestras would never have been able to exist without the positive psychology of peak performance. Their competitive advantage was a culture based on flow. Clearly, I'm not 15 anymore in my room blasting the music. And after 28 years, I'm done teaching violin. I don't even play in an orchestra anymore. But standing here with you, center stage, pouring the core of my soul into every word I speak and every note I play, I've become the soloist. Flow state fantasies are not for you to shut down, brush under the rug, and discredit. They exist for you to see what you are truly capable of. Flow is the gateway to unlocking your genius. But it doesn't end there. It has a ripple effect. And as we close, I have one more story that I really want to share with you here today. And it's about my friend, Linda. She's a high school math teacher. And Linda received a grant, and the purpose of the grant was for her to develop math curriculum that teenage students could actually relate to. And so she assembled a cohort of teachers. They began the brainstorming process. And she noticed that the closer they got to the deadline, the less creative they were, and she didn't know how to lead them through their creative slump. So Linda and I got together to figure out what her flow strategy is so that she could rekindle her own creativity and to lead the others by example. Now, where Linda is when she gets into her flow state the most is sitting at a table in her kitchen. On the outside, she's doing abstract painting. On the inside, she's finding patterns out of chaos. You can't make these stories up. Seriously, that is exactly what she said. And why that's so meaningful is that those patterns become knowledge, and knowledge becomes power and freedom. I just love how unique people's flow strategies are and how they hone in on exactly what makes you tick. So Linda had me come to their next team meeting, and we started with those 3 questions: where, what, and why. And with 20 minutes of peer-to-peer coaching later, everyone coached each other through figuring out their flow strategies. Here's the deal. When you define it, you own it. And with their flow strategies defined, the curiosity took over. And the team burst into this spontaneous conversation where everyone was sharing each other's flow strategies and coming up with plans on how to harness each other's strengths. The synergy was just as palpable as playing in an orchestra. We then took the question of why it's so meaningful and we applied it to the project so that we could unify them through one purpose. And because flow was triggered at the intersection of skill and challenge, we took the time to get very clear on their challenges. All of this became the rocket fuel that ignited their innovative ideas through to the end of the project. And Linda said that the outcomes far exceeded her expectations. I wish I could tell you that their curriculum has changed math worldwide. It hasn't. Linda said that she submitted everything, and as far as she knows, it's sitting in a file somewhere. But what I can tell you is this. When the pandemic threw us all into the unknown, these teachers were equipped. They were equipped to navigate the challenges and to flourish. Imagine all these teachers teaching different. Think of their ripple effect of these teachers teaching in flow for 30 students per class 9 months a year. Now imagine your leaders leading different. What does their ripple effect look like? Does it show up in their family life as they arrive home not drained, but energized? I can't promise you these idyllic conditions on a daily basis, but what I can promise you is this. When you spend more time in flow, you experience more inspiration and joy in your everyday work. And that seed gets planted into all of the different landscapes of your life. And if there's any way that I can help you to make this happen, please let me know. It would be my honor. Understanding your flow strategy and using it as a tool, it's liberating. And by repurposing how you get into flow means you can take your best self with you anywhere. Every one of us is wired for this. Discovering your flow strategy will give you the gift to shift. So you could get into your life like a musician gets into the music on cue.